Welcome back to the Sports Source. Folks, this segment brought to you by the Topoco Lodge. As life gets back to normal, you and your church group or your business or your family might be looking for a unique all-in-one venue, an event space for a meeting or conference or a reunion. Look no further than the Topoco Lodge. They do special events better than anyone because they've got it all right there on site. They've got the lodging, you got cabins, you've got rooms, you've got suites. They've got the food from the Topoco Tavern and the stuff that they can cater for you. It is fantastic. Not to mention this great location there right in the mountains, right on the side of a river. It is beautiful. The Topoco Lodge. Check them out at topoco.com for your event that you are looking to schedule this summer, this fall. All right. This is what I call the four factors. Some of these we've talked about. Some of them haven't been talked about a lot. But these are four things kind of outside Tennessee's control a little bit that have impacted, in my opinion, the decline of Tennessee football. And I'll just run through these very quickly, and we'll see if these guys agree, disagree, which ones they think are more important, less important. One, obviously Tennessee isn't winning. That's their fault. But the cool factor has never been more important in recruiting. 25 years ago, you didn't sign with a school and then everybody, all your peers and all the media, and there weren't 15 websites, jumping on you and saying, why did he go there? What happened here? Now, kids doesn't sign with the big-time school. He has to eat humble pie a little bit immediately on Twitter from the other guys out there. You need that cool factor, I think, more important than ever, and you're not cool. And I think that hurts Tennessee, the fact that now you've got so much focus on recruiting, it's just not a cool place for people to go at the moment. Number two, UT used to be a school that was on TV nearly every week. And I know you're saying, well, they're still on TV every week. Yes, but so is everyone else. See, you used to have that advantage because Tennessee was national. And you'll see this when we talk to the VFLs. Show's already in the can, by the way. Taped it this week. It runs next Sunday. But you'll see the players talk about how many games they watched out of state years ago. And it was rare because you had, 10, 15 games on each weekend, and Tennessee was typically always on? Not anymore. That's a loss, the fact that everybody's on TV now. Next, Tennessee used to have the biggest and best facilities. Now, they still got great facilities, but most of us here, Jimmy, Bob, you remember, Tennessee for years was proud of the fact biggest stadium in the South, second biggest in the country, over and over and over again. Well, Ohio State and Penn State are now bigger than Tennessee, and in the SEC, LSU and Texas A&M are just as big. Alabama's over 100,000. Georgia seats 93. Florida 90. Auburn 87. There are 7 SEC schools with 87,000 seats or more. So when you used to bring players in and say, oh my gosh, look at this Roman Coliseum of a place, half the league now has a giant stadium like that. That has hurt them. And finally, I think scholarship limits took hold. There was a time when kids would sit on the bench at Alabama or Nebraska or Ohio State, and now, well, wait a second, I can go play immediately at Central Florida or Liberty or Coastal Carolina and still get on television. All my games are. So I think those four things, out of Tennessee's control, have impacted this decline. Your thoughts? Got any on there that you disagree with? Anything that needs to be on there that isn't? And we'll talk about their own self-inflicted woes next. But external factors. Do you agree with these? Disagree with these? Where are you?
I agree with those, and I'm going to add one to it. Is the other schools during your heyday, Georgia, mediocre, South Carolina, mediocre.
Bad.
Now South Carolina's back to being mediocre and bad again, but you've got Clemson has taken their place.
South Carolina was horrible back then.
And so I think what happened was that Tennessee was the program and put its natural recruiting area. If you go 250-mile radius around Knoxville, and they lost that too. So I think yours are good, and then you add in that the other programs, okay, Georgia says we'll go out and finally hire a coach who can get us over 500 consistently. South Carolina comes back, then Clemson comes back after South Carolina declines. Yeah. I think that's hurt you too.
That's a good point, that you would have been probably, not even probably, but in the 80s and 90s, late 80s through the early 2000s, like 2000, that 85 to 2001, you were the program in that 250-mile radius. And you're not now. You may not even be in the top 4 of those programs. I agree with that. Thoughts?
Well, I don't want to be too reductionist, but I think a lot of this just goes back to, everyone's kind of dealing with a lot of those things. And although Tennessee had some advantages that have gone by the wayside, if you have a good coach, you know, there's a difference between playing on ESPN2 at 11 a.m. and ABC at 8 p.m. So if you've got a great coach, that big window can still be there, and you don't have that.
Agreed.
And I think, you know, facilities is really hard to differentiate because everyone's got everything now, and it's like,
but that's my
we're
point.
Yeah, we're going to add
Everyone didn't have everything 20 years
exactly.
ago. Yeah.
But I think you can still find some ways, and I just think it's still, there's a lot of things that are the sands that have shifted underneath Tennessee's feet that make it harder, but I still think just bad coaching. There's so many bad college football coaches.
I'm not ignoring that. My question, so you don't think these are as legitimate as...
I think they've definitely impacted, but I still think it comes back to bad hires.
Okay.
I do too, but I guess the one that I would have I would think the least of the four would be the scholarship limitations. That's been around for a while. In Tennessee, with scholarship limitations, still had great teams. Those scholarship limitations started in the 80s, I think.
Yeah, they did, but when did you
So-
start seeing the rise, though? It's only been in the last 10, 15 years that you've seen. I mean, Boise State was really the outlier for years, and people would point to Boise State as the Now you've got several of these. I mean, UCF claimed the national championship a couple of years ago. Coastal Carolina last year, Liberty last year. I think you're seeing more.
Well, Cincinnati.
I think it's spread out a little more of late
Well,
than it did. I
I'm
think it took a
focusing
while.
on SEC. That's kind of where I'm
Okay.
looking. And I'm looking at Alabama, Florida, Georgia, those teams. And so those limitations have been around for a while. So I think that's the least of them.
Okay.
The one that I think is probably the most impactful to me, and we're going to get to the self-inflicted wounds,
Yeah.
it's the advantage of the facilities that you don't have anymore. And in fact, I happened to meet up recently with the former SEC head coach when I was on vacation, and he said he thought facilities was the thing that really hurt Tennessee a lot, the lack of them. When he was in this league, Tennessee was thought to have the best facilities of anybody. Now, almost everybody's caught up, and in many cases, they passed Tennessee. So that was one he pointed to, and that was the one I would think would be number one on that list of four.
I think it's that and the TV things are the top two for me. The facilities, everybody catching up on you, and the fact that, again, if you go back to 85, 1990, you were on TV every week when a lot of teams weren't. And you're right, you could still be on at 8 o'clock instead of lost with everybody else. That's if you're good. But I think that's just a part of what has conspired to drag you down. Now, the big issue is where do the self-inflicted wounds rank? And we'll talk about that in the next
Can I
segment.
add one more to your list?
Very quickly.
Wow factor as far as recruiting, too.
Well, that's a cool factor. That was the first thing that I
Okay,
talked about.
but what I'm saying is you didn't get the guy. Peyton Manning. You get Peyton Manning, other people come to play with Peyton Manning. I know that's kind of an oddity in itself, but over the past 15 years, who have you recruited that somebody else is going to go, I'm going to go play with him?
Okay. Very good. When we come back, let's talk about the self-inflicted wounds. Come on back on the Sports Source.